Welcome to the second day of MARUF, and welcome for all participants. I am Azime Tezer from Istanbul University, City Planning faculty, and within this faculty we are studying the risk management policies and urban planning policies. We have honorable guests here, and I leave the word to our first speaker, Dr. Hitoshi Baba will be the first speaker, and he is an expert and senior advisor in GISA, and he has approximately 15 minutes.
Thank you again for this opportunity of MARUF 2021. 2 years ago, I made a presentation on the concept of continuity management at a real conference in Istanbul, and today I will give online talk jointly with Professor Watanabe, the project leader of the area BCM initiative at present. He is really the key person of the implementation of the ongoing project and establishing a new international standard of the coordination framework of disaster risk management for sustainable and resilient development of cities and industries. Very recently, we have been warned by the IPCC's latest report that the climate change is the matter seriously affecting to cities and sustainability. It is because of the change in global surface temperature, as the report illustrates, with unprecedented warming in more than 2,000 years as already observed. And the simulation of the surface temperature clearly explains that the warming is caused by human factors. As a result, the water cycle is intensifying globally. That means our cities and lives will suffer from more intense storms and flooding. For example, at present 1 degree Celsius warm condition compared to the 1850 to 1900 period, the frequency of 10-year average return period event of heavy precipitation over land is already 1.3 times higher than the past. This increase will further worsen by future global warming levels. For example, in 2 degrees Celsius warming scenario, the frequency is 1.7 times higher than the past. The intensity of the heavy rain is also remarkably uprising, as this scientific analysis shows. Already, as you know, the intensified flooding events are frequently occurring recent years everywhere over the world. For example, in this year, the Western Europe, such as Germany and Belgium, have already been suffered from heavy rainfall and damages. The scale of recent disasters is intensifying not only due to the climate change, but also by rapid urbanization, industrial agglomeration, and unmanaged development. The economic loss of the world in recent years is remarkably increasing, as this chart shows, because as industries are connected by supply chains and trading networks, damage affects beyond borders, and its impact spreads throughout the world. Since a disaster has a significant impact on the local economy, employment, and population outflow, business continuity and early restoration of local industry is essential for normalization of socio-economic activities. With this background, the importance of private sector's role is highlighted, aiming to increase the economic resilience. After 2011 Great East Japan earthquake and the Great Flood in Thailand, we have learned that the function of the single organizational BCM is limited. Japan International Cooperation Agency started discussions with many researchers on the new concept and launched a project as part of disaster prevention coordination between Japan and ASEAN countries. We have discussed the required elements for the new concept in our project. Firstly, the private-public coordination as essential framework of area-wide disaster management system. Secondly, the probabilistic analysis of risks and impacts, which is the basis of understanding weakness of industry in urban area and formulating area-wide plan of disaster management. Thirdly, the management of critical external resources, which aims to effectively manage the common business resources such as energy, water, transportation, and communication infrastructures. Finally, the area-wide scalability of management, which can flexibly expand the management scale based on the variable scenarios of disaster and the changing situation. Area BCM is designed as a cyclic process of understanding risks and impacts, determining the common strategy of risk management, developing the area BCP, and implementing the planned actions and monitoring to continuously improve the area BCM system. The coordinating stakeholders includes individual enterprises, industrial area managers, local authorities, and administrator of the infrastructures, as well as communities. This is the scalable cross-sector coordination framework of risk management for business continuity by enhancing damage mitigation measures and recovery actions. From 2013 to 15, we applied the area BCM practically in 3 industrial areas in ASEAN: a port city of Haiphong in Vietnam, an industrial area surrounding Metro Manila in the Philippines, and an industrial zone around Bekasi City in the east of Jakarta, Indonesia. All these cities and areas are rapidly developing in recent decades. From 2015 to 17, we have also put the same initiative into practice in another industrial area of Pathumthani province, Thailand. Let's look at the time span of last 10 years and the near future. The new initiative called Area BCM was triggered by 2011 catastrophe, put into practice at some areas, and now is proceeding as a project of SATREPS, which is a collaboration project of researchers between Japan and Thailand, aiming to enhance regional resilience against the changing climate through establishment of Area BCM at industry complexes in Thailand. Despite the difficult situation of the pandemic, the project is achieving well, as Professor Watanabe gives more detail after my talk. Based on this experience and lessons, discussions for future international standardization will start soon. Thank you for your curiosity. And now I pass the time for Professor Watanabe, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baba. You have used very good timing. You gave us at least more time. And I would like to welcome Professor Kenji Watanabe, who is from Nagoya Institute of Technology of Disaster and Safety Management Division.
Thank you, Ms. for your introduction, and thank you, Dr. Baba, for excellent introduction. So Dr. Baba's presentation covers most of our projects, so there is no room remains for me to explain, but let me explain more in detail. And good morning and Gunaidon, folks. My name is Kenji Watanabe, Professor of Graduate School of Social Engineering of Nagoya Institute of Technology, and also, as Dr. Baba kindly introduced, I'm a chief representative of SATREP's Area BCM project. And my professional areas are risk management, business continuity management, and critical infrastructure protection. And in this session, I'd like to share a project overview and challenges with you to think about emerging climate change risks and how to live with them by Area BCM concept or the framework. So this is my introduction. So also mentioned in Dr. Baba's presentation, and as Japan has been exposed to earthquake and your country also have been exposed to earthquake. And we both have spent a lot of money and efforts into the earthquake disaster management. However, we have not paid much attention to the flood disaster risks that have been getting severe with higher frequency with the climate change. And as a result, we are now experiencing flood disasters everywhere in the world, and its chain disasters have impacted our socioeconomic activities, especially in the large cities where many resources such as people, goods and services, money and information concentrated. In this summer, the Germany in July and Turkey, your country, in August, and also my country in August, and Thailand in last month flooded and affected the social, economic and activities as well. So based on this kind of trend, we have started the project based on the emerging the flood risks, which will be impact on our socio-economic activities. So this is our background, the overall background of our project. So the project is 5 years project, and we are now in the 4th year, and funded by the JICA, Dr. Baba's the organization, and the JST is the governmental the research fund. So our starting point is 10 years ago. There are also the Dr. Baba mentioned 2011 the big flood in Thailand, and which affected many industrial activities. So flooded many the industrial complexes along to the Chao River, and over 500 Japanese manufacturers, which has a factory in the region, was affected, and that it will stop the global supply chain starting from the Thailand. So as Dr. Baba mentioned, each single organization, including the private sector, public sector, that started establishing the business continuity management system. Some of them are using the ISO standard 22301, but that's not enough, because our society is kind of a networked society. So we have a lot of interdependency among the stakeholders. So we have to work together considering the interdependencies and to establish the interoperability among the stakeholders in the emergency situations. So that's the reason why JICA started the area BCM, the concept building. And our project is taking the concept as a base concept and to make it more the practical and or more operational with some technical platform to sustainable operations for the next decades. So the scope of our project that include disaster impact of urban floods in the Bangkok and surrounding areas where socioeconomic functionalities has been concentrated, and chain repercussions of disaster impacts on important production, logistics facilities in Thailand spread through global supply chains. So Thailand is a key location of the global supply chain in Southeast Asia, and many supply chain is kind of concentrated in Thailand. So that is kind of the bottleneck that can be the bottleneck in the disasters, the severe disasters. And also we position those factors as our emerging disaster risk to be cared and establish risk management operations with the area vision frameworks. This is the project background. So this is more technical aspect of our project. So our project is trying to provide the kind of a system. So we call it a toolkit. So which they aggregate, integrate, and data and information of the existing disaster management or disaster forecasting systems, which are operated by the different kind of organizations with different missions and different systems. So we try to aggregate and integrate those kind of data and information into one database, which can be used by the stakeholders in our LBCM, the framework, the kind of users. So those kind of system or the data or the information can be used for the preparedness for the disaster, and also, of course, the response to the disaster and also recovery from the disasters. So we are trying to design and implement those kind of system into the ARBCM concept in Thailand, industry complexes and surrounding communities, including the responsible local government or the national government. So this is structures of the project. A little bit the busy slide, sorry, but the, as Dr. Bob mentioned, this is a joint the project, not the purely academic project. It's more practical project which required to be implement the operational structure even after we finish the project. So our counterpart is Chulalongkorn University, is a major university of the Thailand. And also we including the National Institute and also the government, especially in Thailand, the side, Ministry of Interior or Ministry of Industry and the Disaster Management Department and so something like that. So, and we divide our project into mainly the four parts, sorry. We call it number one is the item 0. It's a community survey. It's kind of a baseline to understanding the current situation of the people, understanding of the disasters, and awareness of the risk of disaster. And then item 1 is the second part is disaster risk analysis and assessment. So it's a more scientific and engineering part. And such item 2 is a business impact analysis, which is kind of a core engine of the project, which is interpret the output from item 1 into the more business operational decision making. And the last one is item 3, which it is divided into the two parts, but it's designing the whole structure of LBCM and developing the toolkit and implement and put into the operational mode of the structure after our project finished. So I think the totally 60, 70, the researchers and practitioners and the people from the government is working together in this project right now. So this is the example of our output from the system. So our system is getting the input of the flood risk information and resources for business continuity, which is including the location of the factory, warehouse, office, or the employees, the resident, and also the external critical resources. So our system is taking those kind of information as input. And then the process the information into the business impact analysis. You can see the left-hand pictures. So this is a hazard map plus the location map of the business resources. So the company, the decision maker, can be understand which the facilities or resources will be impacted by the expected flood and how fast. So if the main factory is affected by the flood within the next 48 hours, so they have to make a decision to evacuate employees and also transfer their inventories and machineries to other alternative sites to keep they'll continue their business operations. And also, if there is a possibility of the dangerous materials which can be explosion by the water. So they have to notify the local government to make the people to evacuate to the other places. So those kind of the information that our system try to provide to the stakeholders in the community, or the private sectors and the public sectors, also the people living surrounding the industry complexes. So this is one other the example of the business impact analysis. This is an impact simulation of employees' commute. So this chart, this picture showing that which commuter bus service suspended by the expected flood. This company is providing the shuttle bus for the employees to coming to the factory and going back to their home. So this can be provide the information to the decision maker to how fast they have to close the factory to keep their employee safely they return to their home, and when they can reopen the factory after the flood is gone. So those kind of information we are trying to provide from our system. So our approach is a multidisciplinary approach. So not only based on the traditional flood management approach. As for my understanding, the traditional flood management approach is based on the science and technology. So including flood monitoring, forecasting, hazard mapping, water management, hardware engineering, remote sensing, something like that. But we have to consider about more widely, including the social science and life and well-being science. So that's the reason why we invited or include the many different field researchers and practitioners and related governmental agencies in our project. So that means also that too tough to manage the different people sometimes. So second and last one is our goals and challenges. So this is kind of the final picture of our goals, maybe after our project finished. So public-private partnership-based resilience enhancement structure. So it's a joint effort to keep well-being of their citizens or customers or employees, even in the disaster situations. So nobody could not, keep away from any disasters. Disaster will happen anywhere in the world. So the disaster, especially the flood disaster or the flood, the disaster, the risk is in the emerging and getting the severe. So private sector could not live by themselves. And also the public sector also could not survive by themselves. So they have to work together. So this is example is just for the banking industry, but the situation is the same. So between the public sector and the private sector, there is a public-private partnership. So they have to establish the interoperability with the shared risk recognition and standardized operation in emergency situations. So feasible BPP, public-private partnership should be based on the shared recognition of the local risks and shared objectives to keep well-being of citizens even in disaster situations, and shared merits or overcome each limitation of resource critical social function, and translating effort through continuous discussion and exercises. And this is also the Dr. Paul mentioned. One of our goals is the standardization of our area vision concept with ISO proposal. So we are now planning to have a workshop inviting the professionals and practitioners in ASEAN, APEC, and other countries. And of course, we are welcome if any the professionals wants to join us in your country, just let me know. So I spent almost 20 years in the ISO Technical Committee 292 is for the security and resilience. Previously, that was called as societal security. And LBCM framework is
Watanabe, last
yes.
3 minutes, sorry.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. I have to activate my business continuity plan. So don't worry, within 3 minutes. So the LABCM framework is listed in the incoming new item proposal in the working group. And we established the MIRA committee working group in Japan. So we are trying to propose the standardization of LABCM in the future or within this year. So this is my last slide. So of course, we have the long-term goals, the United Nations SDGs, and also the UNDRR's Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. So especially the SDGs number 11 and 8. So people have to work and with keeping the regions or the areas which is exposed to the disaster. So in order to keep the sustainable the living or the operations, we have to think about the resilient, disaster management structure, like the LBCM concept. So this is the long-term goals of our project. So thank you for your attention, and sorry to the overrun the time frame. That's all. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank Professor Watana very much. He made his presentation in full using time. Thanks a lot. Our third speaker is Nuray Aydınoğlu. I would like to invite her. She is here to represent Kandilli Observatory. Yes, sir. Floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you. If you let me. Yes, sir, of course.
Is working on the disasters. For Turkey, mostly the disasters can create major problems. I can say that based on the current situation, we are not able to run healthy processes about the disasters. To run this process in a healthy fashion and this calls for the construction, for the building and engineering systems, and to follow it very rationally and very seriously. So to reach that goal, we need to have two groups of rules that we need to abide. One of them is about the responsibilities, liabilities, and authorities of the people who will fulfill the tasks, the legal procedure, the legalities. The second part are the technical rules, the technical standards and such. So there are two parts of rules. When we talk about a building process, what do we get out of this? After the planning process, it needs to start with urban planning, and we have major problems on that front as well. But this is not my area, and after the planning, I want to talk about the building process. This building process can be divided into two parts. One is the project process, the other one is the actual construction process. And the project process is also divided into two. One is the project preparation, the other one is the supervision of the project. And the project creation and the project supervision and the construction supervision as a trio is called as engineering services. These three are actually carried out by people who have the knowledge to fulfill all these three tasks. There's a major confusion and lack of organization in Turkey. We call these as engineering services, and the main theme of the construction process is fulfilled by construction companies, building companies. We have major problems in Turkey, and we are trying to overcome all these problems for many years, but they're still in place. Of course, the engineering systems are done by human knowledge and human labor. Maybe you need other resources like computers and stuff, but the major resource is the human labor and human knowledge. In other words, the main ingredient of engineering services is the human resource. And to be able to run these services properly, you need to have knowledgeable, informed people so that they can actively take part in the construction processes. And how does that happen? In Turkey, in the disasters, the primary disaster for Turkey is earthquakes, and in the first group of professions included in this group is the civil engineers. And what is the education like in this field? We have major problems in this area. And in Turkey, unfortunately, the university system, especially in the last 20 years, they have established a university in every city, every province, so that every high school graduate will be placed in a university. So this is because there's not a proper professional planning. So when you give a graduate diploma, the number of universities doing this, 93 state universities, and the total number is 127. This is a very high number, and this very high number of universities call for an even larger number of members of faculty, and this is what the situation is. It's impossible to have that many numbers of faculty for those universities, and they have sub branches under civil engineering and construction engineering, which is now called construction and earthquake engineering, and then geodesy engineering, transport engineering, water buildings engineering. They have many sub branches. So within a 4-year graduate degree, it's impossible, undergraduate degree, it's impossible to learn all of these. Of course, there are classifications and specialized areas, but as many number of possible topics as possible are being studied, and under the circumstances, no student can have enough knowledge, for example, about construction and earthquake engineering. We need specialization in Turkey. Why? Because the technical documents become more and more sophisticated. This cannot be met by the undergraduate education anymore. We need to do one of two things. Either we need to have specialization or we need to have more graduate degrees. I have a suggestion for construction engineering. We need to have a separate degree for earthquake construction engineering. There are certain initiatives in the world on that front, but in the coming years, this will be inevitable and it will be dealt with much more attention. Of course, graduate degrees are very important, but we also have major problems about this topic as well. And we know that the most important thing is to have a experience, to have a experience with a master as a rookie or an intern. To have this has become more and more difficult recently. One of the main reasons being is the development of computers, and that many tasks are done by computers. So all the engineering offices have become one person places. So this is changing the situation. This is one of our most important problems. We have also a professional competence problem, which is discussed for the last 30 years. So the competent engineering is a topic that we talk about. Maybe people who are not in this won't believe this, but a new graduate person cannot even a new graduate can prepare a building project, and this is like a newly graduate doctor having an open heart surgery. In the Western countries, in the developed Western countries, and the project supervision and construction supervision and there are expert engineers in the West who have their licenses, and they have certified engineers, professional engineers. They have titles and certifications. Since 1997 in Turkey, the Chamber of Civil Engineers prepared a draft law, and the term of competent engineer was first coined in back then. And this term has become now very common, and this is being used commonly, but unfortunately the concept has not been put into practice, and we have a we don't have actually a supervision for constructions either. The new earthquake circular has been published, and this brought something new in specialized complicated issues, especially in high buildings, and the advanced calculation methods are used. So for auditing them, for supervising them, limited to these special practices, we have brought a system of building audit circular for a limited group of services, and the organization is done by the Ministry of Urban Affairs and Environment. And in 2011, there are 40 experts with building audit certificates, and we hope that this service will become more widespread. We have major issues in building audits. Your last 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes. Okay. Building audit is one of the problematic areas in Turkey. Unfortunately, this was like that since a long time. In 2001, we had the law number 4708, which established building audit institutions, but this wasn't very functional, and it called for quite a large number of revisions. And still the main problem is qualification of the people who will do the building audits. There's no requirement for the qualification or the competence of the building auditors. So the quality audit or assessment is unfortunately impossible. One of the major problems in Turkey is that the second topic, the second leg of the construction works is the constructing system. We have a very primitive system in terms of and in the last 30-40 years, the contractors especially run the business in a very primitive system. Maybe in the recent years, a couple of large companies have come into play, but the number of houses that are built show us that this primitive system is still active. In 2019, we tried to come up with a new system, but the construction must be always undertaken by a construction contractor, which calls for a qualified engineer. But we did not have this law up until 2019, and that is why even a new graduate with a bit of capital and with a lot of courage could go into this business. And they don't need any qualification other than being a member of the Chamber of Engineers. And as of 2019 and today, the number of civil engineers in Turkey is 450,000. And apart from being registered into the chamber, there is no other qualification that one needs to have. In 2019, we had a legal circular, so that the engineers were asked to have certain qualifications with this bylaw or regulation. This was, of course, we don't know what the result will be. It's a very new practice. It's not even 2 years at all. We don't know if the regulation or the bylaws will be put into practice properly. But whilst we strengthen our buildings for earthquakes, we also need to ask ourselves if we hold the responsibility. We need to do this with a really serious approach. And unfortunately, as I have mentioned before, in this country, since the start, everybody goes into this field, and a record number of contractors are working in this field. And the inefficient contractors are in this system, and the cheapest workforce is used, and ironically we are ignorant and we are careless. That actually unfortunately does everything in a very relaxed kind of way. So we don't have qualified engineers. Undoubtedly, we have great contractors, and recently in Turkey, and we know that this is not all throughout Turkey. There are the good ones or the not so good ones. There are promising developments in Turkey, but as I have mentioned in my speech previously, in terms of laws and regulations and in terms of practice, there's still a lot we need to do. Thank you so much, dear Professor. Our last speaker is Mr. Miktat Kadıoğlu. She is from the Meteorological Engineering Department of Istanbul Technical University. Baba and Mr. Professor started with the concepts of business continuity. Also, they had a holistic approach to the business, and my approach is actually also holistic. And the English version is climate risk management. And this actually is aligned with MARUF's approach, and looking at it from a holistic approach is very important. Rethink and act together is the title of my presentation. That's how we need to approach. Baba and Watanabe-san talked about the climate change as well, but I am scared of talking about climate change. And when we look at the climate change issues, it's being covered, and we have lots of problems and mistakes that we are trying to cover. And when we build a building or when we protest, we overlook many issues, and this climate change topic is a bit dangerous. But this is a new approach in Turkey, especially the municipalities, the local governments have they need to think this climate change and they can do things about, say, climate change by themselves, but the other institutions can be doing other things as well. So thinking it together, all together, is critical. In 2018, we came up with the notion of climate risk management, and the business continuity is a concept mostly owned by the IT crowd, but there was not much respect for this at all, and the business continuity was misunderstood anyways. In the business world, it was a different name, especially disaster preparedness was a different name for disaster management. We know that the world is sick, is high fever, and when we get high fever, we catch a virus or a bacteria or microbe, but the world has called people. We talk about the poles, but certain people, just like the polar bears climbing on ice, need to climb on buildings in Turkey to save themselves. This is about setting the correlation between education, research, and the disasters. The numbers maybe don't increase, but the meteorological ones keep increasing in number, and there is a increase in the temperature 4 to 6 degrees until 2100, and this is a very high increase. Actually, we expect it to go down 50%, and this can be extreme weather conditions and like dry seasons, and we need to fight climate change. It's a cycle, actually, to have extreme weather conditions. When we have extreme weather conditions, this is not a particular thing. We need to look at it holistically, and the climate change and meteorological disasters keep increasing. And also in Turkey, the number keeps increasing. I have reported this for for um, United Nations, and when I compare the 60s to 90s and 2000, we see that 3 times more disasters, 9 times more economic loss, and 15 times more insured loss took place. And this will help, this will make us to this will need to be a part of the policies as well, and we need to stop doing many mistakes that we are already doing. And in 2012, we had the climate change risk management approach. It was about managing the risks of extreme events and disasters to advance climate change adaptation. So this is called as holistic concept of climate change risk management, and the same kind of management is united and combined here, and we need to make the risk to become manageable. And just like Ms. Nuray said, we expect 10,000 buildings demolished in Istanbul, and actually we need to manage it not by intervention but by risk mitigation. This is true for all the disasters, and this is a general framework. And there are also climate change issues that we need to adapt to the climate change, and we need to fight climate change. We need to run these two together. But first we need to understand this is the average annual rainfall of Turkey, and this is the distribution. But we don't like uncertainty. Since we don't like to look at risk, we have fixed everything. We don't check the standard deviation, but we actually have a 50% risk of the rainfall in Istanbul for change, and this will be the reason for aridity. And we have the drought periods and desertification. We have a wrong urbanization, misurbanization. There's a water stress. But we commit all these crimes and then blame the climate change. And we don't actually do anything about climate change. We have 112 billion cubic meters water, and we will be using it. And we need every drop of rainfall then. And in the cities, the rooftop water is brought down to the streets. Instead of putting them, bringing them down to the streets, we need to harvest the rainwater and rainfall. And we have 29 cities combined into one single city. And we have very little water catchment in Istanbul, and we have a broken and this is something that we are doing, and this is actually making it worse. This will make all the waters go dry. The consumption in one spot can cause drought and aridity in other parts. So we need to stop building and constructing houses in the water basins. In the history of ancient Anatolia, we had water catchment buildings, and here we're trying to even get the water even to be used by the trees. We're putting all the water into the canalization, and we have a lot to do about water harvesting. Following this, aridity and drought is done by multiple parties. Every aspect is monitored by different institutions, and the main problem is 1st of October was the start of the water year. In Japan, the financial year starts on 1st of March, but this needs to be taken care of. We say that water is as precious as money, but we don't have a budget for water in Turkey, and we don't plan for fighting drought and aridity. And with this unplanned method, we will feel more the effects, the impact in agriculture in the south areas. It is 40 grams annually now, but in 2100 it will be 120 grams. So when we look at the local resources, we shouldn't be using high water resources. We also have climate migrants. This actually is a threat for Turkey and for the world because of mismanagement of water and not. And in the urban areas, the snowfall is less and less, and this weakens the water potential of the cities. And there are heat waves in major cities which are not seen as a major problem, and this is a disaster that we don't see this. In France, because of a heat wave, 2,500 people died, and we need to take this into consideration. We talk about the climate change, but we don't allow to have air corridors in our cities. In Izmir, all the cities were perpendicular to the sea, but now all the waterfront is filled, and the number of trees in cities is next to none. And even if the climate doesn't change, the temperature in cities doubled, and we see that we don't see any changes in these. And in the forest fires, actually Ms. Nuray is lucky. There is actually a maybe a bylaw for construction, but there is no bylaw for constructing in the forests or constructing in the riverbeds, and this is unsustainable. Also, we have an increased number of floods, and we have the lightnings and hail. These are all increasing, and we don't have any education, any training, or any change in the building code practices. There are different types of floods, but in Turkey they're all called flood, and they're all floods. Nobody knows what the differences are, because we are not even aware of the fact that what you do in the rivers in the rural areas cannot be used and applied for the city floods. Yes, the rainfall keeps increasing, and there is an exposure path. What do? We intervene, and then the recipients number keep increasing. So, okay, the rainfall keeps increasing, but it doesn't account for all the other mistakes we commit. In Istanbul, we are a megapole now, which grew twice as much in the last 10 years, and this has increased the city urban floods. And to fight this, we look at the classical methods. We unfortunately don't have any of these, and we don't have flood water catchers, and we are not too good in terms of buildings on the. We don't have even the concept of sponge cities, and about the culverts and buildings we are way behind. We unfortunately don't have training and navigation towards that direction. and the flood borders, the old riverbeds are given to the citizens to build, and this is what our riverbeds are. The buildings built in these look, this was the houses built in the riverbeds. See, they were built higher, so that these are the old Turkish houses, and these are built by the students of Nuray Hoca, and this is what happened. Let alone the traditional architecture, this is the new building. The first one is built by people with no smartphones and no computers 200 years ago, by the old engineers. But now the new engineers build the buildings in the riverbed with computers and smartphones and all calculations, and then they blame it on the rainfall. We need to move the construction away from the riverbeds, but we got even more closer into the riverbeds. We need to have more drainage systems. Unfortunately, we have a very weak drainage system in the cities, and non-structural measures are not common in Turkey. We don't have education, we don't have flood mapping, we don't have evacuation plans, we don't have flood insurance or flood forecast. We are way behind of other countries who have solved all these issues 50 years ago. In our books, there's no chapter about flood protection. We tell people to be careful against a flood. Okay, it's your last 4 minutes. So you have given 3 minutes. 3 minutes to Mr. Baba. Okay, so with the climate change in northern Turkey, the rainfall increases, but the central part is pretty stable. The major problem arises from the Taurus Mountains, southern sides. The rainfall decreases and aridity increases, and this brings problems of drought. So whilst the climate changes, all these meteorological disasters increase exponentially. So without thinking what to do about these issues, this is a multi-shareholder issue. We can't overcome the problem unless we work together. The business continuity or climate risk management, however you choose to name it, this needs to be dealt with based on certain standards. It's not about what I think and what you think, and it's not about what we do all by ourselves. It's a waste of time, money, and energy if we do that. So we need to act in alignment with international standards, and we need to rethink the global climate change, and we can call it either disaster risk management or business continuity and adaptation to climate change. This is a trio. So risk equals danger, exposure, and vulnerability. When risk becomes real, we call it a disaster. To solve this problem, there's no meaning in doing any one of these in a single fashion. We need to bring all of these together within a master plan, including all of these components. A comprehensive plan with a systematic approach must be put into practice. So it's not about coming up with a single project. You are as strong as your weakest links. So you need to have prevention, adaptation, refraining from exposure, and mitigating our vulnerability. We need to do this in unity and solidarity. So no matter how much you pay to one single piece of work, a single piece of work will not achieve anything. So the adaptation to climate change will enable us to have a holistic approach so that we can use our resources, energy, and time in a more efficient way, and we can create higher added value for the safety and welfare of our people, and we can reach the goals of the international documents easily, and we can benefit from international finance resources in a more efficient way. ASEA and JIPA works closely with the institution. We need to work closely with other institutions so that we can benefit from their experiences. We need to read more to have education. It's not enough to have a university education. If you're going to do anything about climate, then you can read these books. The publications of MARUF is very important. Thank you so much. Let's manage the risks, not the damage, not the hazard. Now we need to switch to risk management instead of crisis management. Thank you so much, Professor. Now we will go back. We have about 14 minutes. There are no questions for our speakers. Let me ask the management to our coordination team. No questions. So I can ask you questions. We have foreign participants from Japan. I want to ask them a question. And we have a similar study that was presented by Baba and Watanabe. If I didn't get confused, there is a timeline of 10 years. What they study has a background of 10 years. They also said that they did it in Thailand as well. What are the outputs that you could see the change, that you could did you have the output which showed you that you actually had a change? Do you have a tangible set of outputs that can compare the before and after the project? What are the tangible outputs? Can you please tell us?
Okay, that's the very good question. So that is our challenge, in the project. But the tangible, I think that we prefer the not tangible but intangible, the output. So maybe tangible the output in flood disaster management is kind of a hardware or hardware related facilities. But we are trying to the intangible, the framework to information sharing and the decision support and coordinate the the people's activity, the stakeholders' activities in disaster situations. So, of course, the tangible, the the counterpart is most effective to the disasters, in the early stage or the initial stage of the disaster happens. But right after the tangible, the counterpart is broken or the disaster is come over the tangible, the counterparts, the software or the intangible, structure will be more important to keep the people's safety and keep the people's situation to work together. So of course, our tangible output should be like some of the systems or the materials or in the handbook to facilitate the workshop. But we are trying to more the intangible output in community relationships, and also the PDCA cycle to continue the area business continuity management, the concept in the region. So am I answering your question? I trust the Google's the automated translated functionalities, but
Thank you so much. I have another question to Mr. Aydınoğlu. Actually, Mr. Miktat also underlined it in his speech, and that's what I wanted to say. In 2018, in terms of building audit, we had a comprehensive building audit concept focused on earthquakes, and in the past this was mostly focusing on the newly built constructions, but now the building audit has a earthquake based approach, but also including old buildings. What do you think about old buildings, and what is your approach in terms of building audit? Can you please tell us? When we talk about disasters, I of course focus on my own specialty, the earthquakes. But in my speech, and the other topics are also true for especially the floods, which are a threat for our country recently. The incidents in Kastamonu and in Sinop has shown it to us. And there is a major issue. There is inadequate discourse about the audit. I told you if we have enough audits, and I told you that it wasn't. And apart from the earthquake, you're very right. We discussed this with Miktat as well. We have a lot of things lacking or missing. So in our education system, I advocate that the earthquake engineering needs to be a specialty, but it doesn't mean that other fields should not be a specialty either. In Turkey, it has become so common, a priority. The floods have become a major disaster for us, and this is true for all the other disasters as well. And since we focus on the earthquake, we have ignored the other types of disasters in building and audit. So thank you so much for underlining this. Thank you so much, sir. I have a question for Mr. Miktat as well. And we have you had the notion of rethink and act together. Within a university, there are many different disciplines, and to have a multidisciplinary approach, what should the universities do? What are your opinions about this? Your mic is turned off. Okay. Maybe it can be given in elective classes. In USA, for non-meteorologists, they had lessons for non-meteorological sciences, they can have a selective class. So maybe we can do the same thing. We can have the essential notions of urban planning and what are the core topics of urban planning can be given. In engineering faculties, we can teach them about the housing or home, actually. What is a home? So every division takes it particularly or single-handedly in their own discipline. So there's not a accumulation. In ITU, we're now setting up an office for sustainability. We have a sustainability office, and this office includes a zero carbon emission and energy and other topics are included in this. And we are more focused on expertise and specialties, like in a cardiovascular hospital. When you go to a doctor, they see you only as a couple of lungs, a set of lungs. They don't see you as a human, and the same is true for the other disciplines as well. And we need to have graduate programs in it. If we can have a sustainability graduate degree, we can talk about the different ways and methods of fighting climate change, and we need to come up with different ways of fighting climate change. We need to get out of our own departments and get together to fight all together, and we need to dissipate this culture. Thank you so much. There are a couple of questions in the chat box now. So, what are the anticipated impacts of climate change for Izmir? And then the books that you suggested are not sold anymore. How can we find the disaster management? The ISO standardization item that you said, 22301, is it about urban planning? And also, one more. There's a suggestion about founding a Ministry of Climate in Turkey, and also they say that it should be mandatory in the universities to have disaster management and climate change. And the cities, as you have mentioned to all of our participants, the effect, the impact of disasters keep increasing because the areas that people live together keep increasing, and this increases the impact of climate change. And can we not expect these classes to be mandatory in the curricula of the schools? Can we expect a change in the climate change? So with the scope of these questions, anything else you want to add? There is a difference in Izmir and Ankara in terms of climate change because Izmir is on the water, especially the coastal area. The seawater keeps rising, and this might be a major challenge. And if we don't build our buildings correctly, then when the sea water rises 1 unit, it has an impact of 100 units on a horizontal scale. 1 unit of vertical rise has this impact. At the west, in the western part of Izmir, there's an impact of the sea, and usually the air systems act from west to east, and this can impact to this can cause a temperature rise, and we need to take these three parameters into account, and especially the agricultural products must be carefully selected, choosing less water dependent plants is important. We need to have climate friendly plants, and we expect an increase in the forest fires, and thinking they are now finishing the broadcast. I would like to thank everyone. We have a note from the coordination center. We would like to thank all presenters. Thank you so much for your contribution.